Should be a little late. Yep, we got a form here. She'll be coming late.
Yeah.
John, you ready? You and Susan ready? Are we recording?
Yep.
We got these recorders on?
Yep. Susan just started them.
Okay, perfect. Good evening and welcome to City Council meeting. We did start a little late this evening. Some of our council members had some conflicts. Councilman Barker attended the Truth and Taxation hearing for the fire district. So we still want to have this meeting, but we want to start a little bit late. I do want to acknowledge Council Member Ekstrom, who is online with us. He's out of town, but has joined us via Zoom. And Councilman Stoker will be joining us a little bit later as her conflict comes to a conclusion. We'll start this evening with an invocation or thought, and pledge of allegiance by Council Member Barker.
Let's start with an invocation. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to gather this evening as North Ogden City residents and members of the public. We're grateful for the opportunity that we can discuss city business, and please bless us that we'll be guided by the Spirit and that we'll be able to make the best decisions to move North Ogden forward. Bless us that we'll have an enjoyable, peaceful evening, and these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Tonight is a special city council meeting. It's on an off week. Is that true?
It is.
Okay. So I just wanted to thank Susan for posting the notice of the meeting this evening. For those of you who'd like to see it, is attached to the council documents this evening. At this point in time, council, I would call for any conflicts of interest that you may have regarding tonight's agenda.
Mayor?
Council Member Ekstrom?
Yes, I have a business that is, I think, in the C2 zone. So I do have an interest in the changing of the sign ordinance, just to make that known. Seeing what's under consideration, I don't know that it's a conflict, but I just wanted to let that be known.
Thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom. We'll move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is a discussion or action to consider approving the June 8th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes. Do we have a motion or any discussion?
Mayor, I move that we approve the June 8th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanson. We have a motion. Do we have a second to the motion?
second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the June 8th City Council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. At this point in time, we have a special occasion. We're swearing in a new police officer this evening. Christian, is it Medell?
Yes, sir.
Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, sir.
If you and the chief would come forward, I think our city recorder, Susan Nance, will swear you in as one of our North Ogden officers.
And then just repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of this state,
of this state,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties
the duties
of my office
of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The guy with the huge sense of humor.
Thank you.
Chief or Officer Madell, would you like to say anything this evening?
Oh, that's a lot of pressure.
It's just to welcome you to North Ogden.
I'll just give you a little background on Officer Liddell. He came to us from the Department of Corrections, where he worked at the state prison. And so he had his correction certification. And we sent him through his law enforcement portion of post, which went through with flying colors, and he's been out of, graduated almost about 2 weeks ago. So he's just at the beginning phases of his field training, and he's doing an exceptional job already. So we're excited to have him.
I look forward to continuing.
Thanks for joining us.
Great. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Look forward to it. We'll now enter to the active portion of our agenda. We'll seek public comments, and just as a reminder, those of you who would like to make comments, please limit those to 3 minutes. I would just remind any of you that are here to talk about any of the rezoning or ordinances this evening. Now would be your best time to make public comments. So we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. And if you would come to the podium and state your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden, we appreciate it. So we'll start now.
Hi, I'm Leanne Whipper. My address is 2660 North 450 East. I'm here to just share some comments with you about item number 9. And I would urge you to keep this city zoning as is. I'm very opposed to changing that zoning. And I'd like to just tell you why. I live right across the street from this area. And in several years ago in 2005, I was very, very involved with many citizens in getting this zone changed. We were part of creating that city zone. And it was in a direct response to, in our opinion, a very bad choice to allow those 10 plexes to be built. I don't know if you're familiar with that block, but that was a real shock to us, all of the neighbors, the community. It was a real surprise, and we were determined to get to the bottom of it. So we researched all of the procedures. We got legal counsel, and we were very gratified in the end to find out that we were right. There were some things that the developer didn't qualify for as far as square footage and setback. And I think anyone who drives by can see that. It's completely obvious. But more than that, it changed the complete dynamics of our neighborhood. This multi-dwelling smack in the middle of single dwelling homes really changed things for us. And I must say that the Planning Commission and the City Council, the mayor, the city attorney, they were all very, very sympathetic to what this cost, this improperly given conditional use permit. But the cement had already been poured, so there was nothing that could be done about it, except try to keep it from happening again. So we worked very closely, a whole bunch of citizens and the Planning Commission, to come up with the city center zone. And the point of it was to protect our old center, keep that heart safe. I totally believe that the owners have a right to develop their property. I'm so happy for them that they have the chance to do that, but I just urge you to keep it in the limits that are already set. We feel like that's a very acceptable rate of development for that area. So that's all I wanted to say. Do you have any questions for me?
Council. I think Scott did a very good job in his write-up, and many of the things you just spoke about are mentioned in there. So Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. I have to go tend my grandkids now. So.
That's much more important. Good luck to you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Steve Flinders, and the address is 2679 North, 450 East. And that's the property we're talking about with item number 9. My wife and I got this property from her father and mother, who are both now deceased. And it's quite a dilapidated property. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's right across from the park and the skate park. This property is actually quite prime for a development such as this. What happened is we met with the planning commission virtually in January, and we took away from that meeting that they were giving us almost a virtual thumbs up, that this was in line with the vision of the use of the city center multi-use residential property. So we went to the expense of hiring engineer, Gardner Engineering and contractors and so forth to go forward and to actually pay to present this zone change toward you, to the city. We feel like, well, if you'll agree with me that houses are getting smaller, properties are getting smaller, lumber is skyrocketing and almost out of control. And water, as we've learned, is actually a commodity that needs to be shared with all community members. And I think that this type of a development in front of this park is a chance for single-family homes, common wall with 5 or 6 families living right across from the park, being able to use the amenities of the skate park, the elementary school, the basketball courts, just makes sense. So if this is not in line with the vision of this city, then we understand. And maybe that's our mistake for misunderstanding. But we went to the expense to go forward with it, and we think it's a good addition. We're talking about homeowners. They're not rentals. These are taxpayers. These are voters. These are homeowners. And of course, the yards will be small, but that's the nature of how housing is going right now. I think that's the future, all the way across America. So anyway, having said that, we respect the decision of the council, but we urge you to reconsider and help this project to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, councilors. I'm Sean Flinders, and my address is also 2679 North, 450 East. The owner of the property in number 9. Like my husband just said, we actually have, even before my dad passed away, which was 1 year ago yesterday, put a lot of time, effort, and thought into what we wanted to do with this property. We did not take it lightly. We did a lot of research, even on the North Ogden website, to see what would be the best thing for this area. We preliminarily went to the commission, the planning commission, like he said in January, to make sure, and you could even listen back to that meeting, to make sure that before I put any money into this, that this is what they want there, this is their plan, and they were all for it. Every single one of them, yeah, this is what we plan to have here, this is exactly what we envision. So I went to the expense and the time and effort to put this together. This is not something where we just fly by night did it. I still believe that this is the right thing to be there. I know Leanne. I spoke to John Shoup's wife at my father's funeral and told her what our plan was. Told her we were gonna be fixing up the yard, that we were gonna put in some, you know, luxury townhomes, nice places, that we would put up a, you know, privacy fence. And she was all for it. Everyone was very excited for us to get this property looking better, you know, and functional. So I am, you know, when we came to the planning commission meeting, I was more than blindsided that no one of these neighbors had ever said a word to me. Had ever in any way, knowing that I was putting money into this, had ever said anything to me. And it felt a little bit like an ambush at that meeting. I came by myself. I didn't, you know, it's just me and my husband. I didn't bring anyone to support me. I had no idea that it was a fight. So when we came, the planning commission, after a very dramatic talk by Leanne about this 10-plex that went in, almost going on 20 years ago. It seemed like she was, you know, very upset about it, a little bit victimized by it. And no one that spoke that night really said anything about our project. John came up and talked about maybe young people moving in there and not having food storage. Someone who had just built a, you know, $1 million home up the street, like the park view and the smell of horses. But, you know, when we wanted to do this, we did this because little families, younger families should be using that area. I thought long and hard, those are the people that should be across from that park. And I think it's a little bit arrogant and a little bit entitled for the neighbors around this property to insist that we put $1 million home on that property with a lot of green space that they can't water. I just think that these properties are gonna be changing. That's what's gonna be happening. And we should be putting families in there that can use those amenities, that can walk to the school. I walked to the old North Ogden Elementary School, yards away from my house. And that's what should be there. It shouldn't be someone who's got a lot of money.
I'm gonna have to limit
There.
you to our 3 minutes, but
Okay.
as the applicant, you will have an opportunity.
Okay, no
Okay.
problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Casey, North Ogden. I am also commenting on number 9, and I actually feel really bad to hear that planning commission gave them kind of the idea in January to go forward and come up with this idea. I'm a little bit torn. I think it's a great area, and I know that the idea of starting to do the smaller homes and a little bit higher density through a city center walkable makes sense. I just wonder what size of a step we're taking from, you know, single family homes to the 6 townhomes. I also am concerned about the impact it has on existing homes. I think that that's really important, the property rights of those to build, but also the existing homeowners' property rights. We've got a home that would be in the backyard of that who will now walk out to see, I mean, townhomes make a wall. So they will see a wall, a back wall. I was really frustrated to look at the R4 zoning and see that, or the city center zoning and see that the town or duplexes was removed. You know, I think that there's some options to develop this into a little bit of a, not a single family home, something that may fit that area and start that transition to a city center without negatively impacting those single family homes that still exist right there. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Council, my name is Trevor Graves. I'm also here to talk about item number 9, the 2679 North, 450 East. So it's my grandparents' property. Sean and Steve are my aunt and uncle. So I do have a pretty strong connection to this property. And the other thing is I'll also be the builder on this. It's not just a builder that they picked out just for the cheap of it. You know, I have a lot of attachment to it, a lot of care. I understand the neighbors' concerns. Like Sean and Steve said before, these are not rental units. These are high-end townhomes that will be selling to families. You know, we'll just to kind of address some of them, you know, we will take a ton of pride in our work, and we do a ton of work up in North Ogden, up in the Cove. And you can see our work speaks for itself. So I just kind of wanted to let everyone know who will be doing the project and that we do care and we do have a lot of attachment to this. So thank you.
John, do we have any comments online? Linda?
I'm not talking about number 9. And my name is Linda Lundstrom. I live at 177 East Alberta Drive. Pardon me if I read, I don't want to forget anything. Our home has become a corner lot now because of the new housing development on 160 East between Alberta Drive and Lowman View Drive. Because of the grading of the road of 160 East, a retaining wall has been built on the west side of our property. Upon recommendation of the Planning Commission, the City Council is allowing us to put a fence on top of the sidewalk adjacent right next to that retaining wall, which varies in height from 15 inches up by the stop sign to basically 33 inches back at the south end. The fence we have contracted for is a black wrought iron fence, 6 feet tall, running along the west side of our property, which runs north and south, and then across the backyard, which runs east and west. I've been advised by the Planning Commission that because of the need for a sight triangle for the traffic turning onto Alberta Drive, our fence can only be 2 feet high from the stop sign going back about 40 feet to the south of our property. The retaining wall, the starting point for a 2-foot fence is 26 inches high, which could be a hazard in our opinions. Here are my concerns. I know that our city government is about protecting the safety, health, and welfare of its citizens. Given that, the 2-foot high fence seems to me to be more of a safety hazard than anything else, especially given the fact that our fence is wrought iron and therefore virtually see-through. We all know what children and teenagers would do with a 2-foot high fence, to say nothing of anyone else walking down the sidewalk who could trip over it. Most particularly my husband, who is has a difficult time walking. I drive a Toyota sedan, which is slung quite low. From the road to the top of my door is 40 inches. My side is probably another 10 inches above that. So we're looking at 48, 50 inches above the road to be able to see. So there's a great deal of difference between a 2-foot fence and an ability to see down the road. I have read Pleasant View's Title 16 on fences, and as far as I can ascertain, a fence on a corner lot cannot exceed 3.5 feet. I have also driven around North Ogden and have seen several solid vinyl fences about 6 feet tall that come within feet of the street and require a driver to inch out into the road to even see oncoming traffic properly. I hope the City Council will take some of these into consideration and reconsider raising the fence height for corner lots to be at least 3 feet, and or make some considerations for case by case is called for. Thank you.
Thank you. Being told we have no one on Zoom that's raised their hand. Anyone else this evening? We appreciate your comments and your attendance this evening. We'll move on then to item number 6. Brandon Bell, our associate planner, will present this item. It's a discussion regarding action to consider an ordinance to rezone property for land located at approximately 96 East, 3275 North. They're requesting a rezone from single-family residential R110 to suburban residential RE20. I must say, council, this is one of the first times I've seen zoning go up instead of down. So Brandon will be interested to hear your presentation.
Mayor and members of the council. So this is for property at 96 East, 3275 North. And it's approximately 6.31 acres. As the mayor mentioned, it's currently R110, and the property owner, who is the applicant, has proposed to change that to RE20. This is a legislative decision. I'm going to read the legislative decision statement. When the city is considering a legislative land use decision, the Planning Commission acts as a recommending body to the city council. The city has a wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. The property that this relates to, and it's up right here, is in a currently developed subdivision. That's an approved lot. It was approved many years ago. I don't know the exact year, but and it also, the rezone covers a nearby parcel that's behind the canal, which is owned by the federal government, and so the property owners owns both of the parcels on both sides of the canal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the zoning and land use policy guidelines, and in cases where they conflict, the city council should prioritize the guidelines as they relate to the issues surrounding this property. All zoning requests should be first evaluated for their compliance with the general plan. So the first guideline is that a definite edge should be established between the types of use to protect the integrity of each use, except where the mixing of uses is recommended in the general plan. Staff comment on this is that the low density designation in the general plan calls for a range of densities, which includes those permitted in the RE20 zone. The RE20 zone is similar to the R1 zones in that they both permit single family dwellings at relatively low densities, but the RE20 zone also allows some agricultural uses. The property under consideration has historically been home to an orchard, and the property meets the requirements of the RE20 zone for a lot in that zone. The next guideline is that zoning should reflect the existing use of the property to the greatest extent possible, unless the area is in transition or is in conflict with the general plan. The staff comment on this is that the area is not in transition and is fully developed. The RE20 zone does reflect the existing use of the property, including the fact that it meets the zone requirements for the RE20 zone, and is not in conflict with the general plan. The next guideline is that where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or a similar zone. Collector and arterial roads may be sufficient buffers to warrant different zones. Staff comment on this is that the property across the street and the other surrounding properties are R110, and the RE20 zone can be considered a similar zone as the R110 zone. Zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments, placing the lot in two separate zones. Illogical boundaries should be redrawn to follow property or establish geographical lines. Staff comment on this guideline is that the proposed zone change would not cut across individual lots. It would extend across a property held by the United States of America for the canal, that however is not a lot, it's a parcel. The next few guidelines are avoid isolating neighborhoods. Staff is not of the opinion that this would the new zone would be somewhat similar as the existing zone and would not isolate the existing neighborhood. Require excellent design, that does not really pertain to this application. And then consider development agreements to assure higher quality development is the final guideline. And staff comment is that no development agreement is proposed. The Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend the rezone of the property from single family residential R110 to the suburban residential RE20 zone. The city council should consider the general plan, rezoning guidelines and make a decision regarding this rezone. And the city council can find that the application to rezone the property to RE20 is consistent with the general plan. I'd also like to point out there's a couple considerations for the council. Is the proposal consistent with the general plan? And how does the proposal relate to the zoning and land use policy guidelines? I'd like to just note in the comments, I left off the last page of the notes, or sorry, the minutes pertaining to this issue from the planning commission. There was just one, a portion of the sentence that was excluded. And so I just wanted to provide the rationale of the couple of members of the commission. They said that this is Commissioner Webb and Chairman Thomas stated that this zone changes, their opinion was that this zone change is in line with the city's general plan. The subject property is large enough in size to be considered agricultural in nature, and granting the RE20 zone will provide for appropriate buffering between different uses. Just provide that for context as you discuss this issue. And I have, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those.
Very nice write-up in the packet, Brandon. It was very informative. So hopefully the council's had a chance to read that. Any questions for Brandon this evening, council?
Just one note. I believe that the applicant is attending on Zoom. I didn't see him here in the room. He stated he would be probably attending on Zoom or in person, so I'm guessing he's on Zoom.
Thank you, John. Is the applicant with us this evening?
Yes, we do have Brett Johnston on.
Brett is the applicant. If you have any comments at this point in time.
No, I just appreciate the council taking a look at this and your time here this evening. For my family and this property, you know, it is odd to see someone want to keep it as, you know, a larger property and for agricultural use. That's our vision for the property, and we just you know, that's why we're asking for this rezone, and we appreciate the council's time.
Thank you. Council, any questions of the applicant? Any further questions for Brandon?
Mayor, I had a question.
Councilmember Ekstrom, go ahead.
All right, now, when it says agricultural, and this is just highlighting my ignorance about all of the different types of zones, but for RE20 and it says agricultural use, does that mean that they can plant agricultural things, or is it they can have like agricultural animals on there? I'm just, you know, I really try to make sure that if we're going to change something, it's that thou shalt not cause a problem for thy neighbor. So, you know, if they're going to be like cows or something on there, then I want to think about that a little bit more than if they're just going to be able to, you know, plant a big garden or a, you know, field of wheat.
Okay, we have Brandon back at the podium. Brandon?
So there's agriculture is allowed. There's some use of animals. It's limited in scope. I don't have the exact numbers of that. I've asked Scott to pull that up, but there is some animals that are allowed to be used. I do believe that I'll let the applicant clarify this is correct or not, but as I mentioned in my staff report, there's it's either a peach or not a peach, but a nectarine orchard, I think, on the property. So there is some animal use. It does have limits based on the size of the acreage, but there's also agriculture in terms of planting crops is allowed in the zone. So I think Scott might be getting the numbers on what's allowed in the zone, the RE20 zone.
So they can keep animals or fowl on 1 acre or more up to 5 acres. Animals and fowl are limited to 4 horses, cows, sheep, or goats, or a combination thereof per acre. They can have 5 rabbits per acre or 5 groups of animals and then there's 4 different groups. So animal keeping and agricultural uses for planting are both in the RE20 zone.
And I think as Brandon mentioned, a good portion of this is in an orchard, but according to the zone, basically 4 animals per acre. And there's 6.13 acres, as I recall. That includes probably the canal, which that's exclusive of the canal. Councilmember Ekstrom, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So then my question goes to the applicant of have you talked to your neighbors and make sure they're okay with it? Again, I really just try to avoid conflicts between neighbors if we can, and if they're informed about what's going on and that nobody's having any heartburn about it.
John, is the applicant still with us?
Yes, I gave Brenda the right to talk instead of Brett, so. Brett can now speak and answer
Brett?
that.
Thank you. Currently, we have 2 dogs, 3 kids. That's all the animals our household desires at this moment in time. We don't have any fences up, behind those properties that you can see with the 4 or 5 lots there. There's no fences. We don't have any fences across the canal. This is strictly just us maximizing the use of our property. It is an apricot orchard for the most part. So, if anybody's looking for apricots, you're gonna have to wait till next year, but there's plenty of them.
Councilmember Ekstrom, any further questions for the applicant?
No, I think if he's existed, most, in peace with his neighbors so far, I don't anticipate that he's going to have any problems in the future, and at least I hope not.
Brett, is that then 2 animals or 5? I'm unclear on that.
Yeah.
All right. Any further questions?
We have 2 animals, 2 dogs.
Okay. I thought that's what I concluded. Council, any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-25 to rezone this property to RD20. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move that we adopt ordinance 2021-25, rezoning property and land located at approximately 96 East, 3275 North from single-family residential R110 to suburban residential RE20.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanson. Do we have a second to that motion?
I second.
We have a second by Councilmember Severing. Any further discussion, council? Okay, this being an ordinance, I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll now move on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is discussion or action to consider an ordinance to revise the total area of commercial signs in the C2 zone. Kai Johnson, our planning tech, will give us the presentation. Kai?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, the application in front of us is a request to change the area of the total area of commercial wall signs in the C2 zone. The applicant is Philip Child, the owner of the Ace Hardware here in town. A bit of background, he submitted a building permit application to add a sign to the west facing side of his building where there was originally planned to be a building built in the future. There was the ATM site was relocated there, so there's no longer a building in that site. The issue he has is these right at the maximum of 200 square feet of signage on his building currently. And so he submitted some language or proposed some language to amend the sign ordinance to rather than 200 square feet up to 250 square feet. In our discussion with the Planning Commission, they recommended that we add some language to restrict it to situations that kind of fit this where they're a little more unique, with parking lot and alley access on 3 sides of the building. And so what we've done is we've added an exception into the ordinance for buildings with 3 or more sides open to a parking lot or an alleyway, that they may increase their signage up to 25% for a total of 250 square feet. In our original research and analysis of other surrounding city signages, ordinances in their C2 zones, our signage is a little more restrictive. Harrisville allows 3 square feet per linear foot of frontage with a maximum of 600 square feet, with a limit on the maximum size of a single face sign face, which is 300 feet. And there's also provision for shopping centers with additional road frontage, et cetera. Pleasant View, their signs are limited to 2 square feet of sign frontage for every linear foot of building frontage, and one single sign shall not exceed 100 square feet. Ogden is 3 square feet per linear foot of building frontage with a maximum of 400 square feet. Brigham is 4 square feet of sign area for 1 linear foot of building frontage, or 2 square feet of sign area for every linear foot of lot frontage, whichever is the least restrictive. So in Riverdale, which is kind of the more extreme example, would be they allow for 3 square feet per linear foot of building frontage with a maximum single sign permitted of 300 square feet and 600 square feet total if the property has the frontage. So the planning commission discussed that, and they proposed that language change to the ordinance to add the exception rather than just move the stick in the mud to 250 square feet. Do you have any questions for me?
Council, any questions? John, any Zoom? The applicant is with us this evening if they'd like to comment.
Just with what was discussed in the planning commission meeting, if you look at the wall now, it's just blank. It will look better with a sign, which I think benefits the city. And it also helps us because we have a sign that we can visibly see. So I think it's a win-win.
Thank you. Mike Child, North Ogden. Are you in North Ogden yet?
Yes.
All right.
Not in the house, but yes.
All right, welcome to the city. Council, any questions? All right, seeing none, then I would look for a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-26, which amends the total area of commercial signs in the C2 zone. Do we have a motion?
Hey, Mayor,
Councilmember Barker.
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 2021-26, amending our commercial sign ordinance in the C2 zone with the wording as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Barker. Do we have a second? A second. Okay, we'll go with Councilmember Severing on the second. Any further discussion?
I just want to commend the planning commission for coming up with a really nice solution here, rather than moving the stick in the mud, but finding, a way for us to approve those exceptions where it makes sense and not create a problem in other places. Well done.
Thank you, Councilman Swanson. I believe this shows city's effort to try to help businesses be successful in our community. Any other comments? We'll have a roll call vote then. We'll start with Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 8. Scott Hess, our planning director, will be presenting this. It'll be a discussion or action to consider an ordinance to amend and clarify language regarding hedges as they are defined as a fence. So this sounds pretty exciting, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council. I mean, I was hoping that public comments were here to really talk about the big issues, which are, when is a hedge a fence? And, even more confusing, when is a row of tightly spaced trees a hedge, which does that then make it a fence? So these are the things that we get to answer here, and spent some time looking into this. It was interesting. So our regulations regarding fence heights and hedges, as they're defined in the city, are loosely defined enough that any hedges in a backyard area, back and side yard area, could be defined as fences, which would then limit their height. So thinking of anybody who's had a lilac bush go a little bit wild and get 10 feet tall, the city could go around and ask them to start lopping those down to 7 feet, especially if they're in a side yard. We talked about all sorts of complicated ways to measure this and site areas and shading. And I think the answer really came down to intent. Is the hedge intending to be the fence? And if that's the case, if it's planted on property line, then it should be limited to the size and height of the fence. If the hedge is planted behind the fence, it's landscaping, it's designed for shielding of visibility and sound and protection of the property owner's property, then it's landscaping. And if it gets so obnoxious that the neighbors have an issue with it, it's blocking out all the sunlight, their grass is dying. It's become really awful, then let nuisance law in land use law take over. And that property owner could sue their neighbor for impacts to their property. And there's a whole long lineage and history of spike fences in land use law and nuisance law related to heights of fences and them blocking out sunlight. And so we think it's reasonable for the residents of North Ogden City to be able to distinguish between when they're planting a tightly spaced row of anything as the fence and when it's the hedge. So in 11-10-11, staff is recommending and planning commission has recommended to approve additional language in sections A and B to state hedge provisions in this code section apply only to hedges used in place of a fence or acting as a fence as defined in 11-2-1. This is a legislative item. Your questions in front of you would be whether the city council can assure that, conformance with the general plan. Whether this is in conformance with the general plan, is the request a positive change for not only a specific property, but does it make sense for the entire city? Is there any additional language that's appropriate for the ordinance? And is the proposal consistent with the general plan? And with that, I'll take any questions, comments. I think I missed the brief history on this is we had a homeowner who had a tall fence, came to the city looking to plant a row of tightly spaced trees that would have, columnar trees that would have been taller than the fence height regulations. And the code was loosely defined enough that it was easy to define that as a fence, and we were, had to tell that property owner, no, they couldn't do what they were looking to do in that location. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Scott? So Scott, when is a fence a fence?
I mean, I guess I don't know, if is it blocking the passage? That's one. It's not visibility because you can have 2 rail fences or split rail fences or, hog fence. So I think it's the intent to block passage. And we have used, this is another loose interpretation of this code, but had a very tightly spaced planting of scrub oak that would have been, you would have had to work really hard to get through it. That was determined to be a fence on a property owner's property.
Okay, council, do you have any questions for Scott? All right.
Hey, Mayor, I've got one.
Councilman Barker.
This may not pertain exactly to this discussion, but since we're talking fences and it says corner lots up here.
Yep.
We had a comment earlier about requiring her to have a 2.5-foot fence, but in that, it says it can be in a height of maximum of 6 feet, but there's no minimum.
Yeah, so the fence ordinance is really specific. And so as you get down, you have fence height along your front property setback. In North Ogden, that's generally 30 feet unless you're in one of the areas where it's been reduced to 20 for specific reasons. It's 6 foot high. So you can go 30 feet back, 6 foot high, and then surround the back of your property with a 6-foot fence. The front of your property can be 3.5 feet high, unless you're in a corner, on a corner lot with the corner site triangle, which runs 40 feet from the back of right of way in each direction, and then cuts a corner across. In that clear view triangle, nothing, fence included, can be taller than 2 feet above the average grade of the top back of curb. So the fence, you could run a 3.5-foot fence, and then technically you could put that fence at 2 feet, which is really more of a tripping hazard. There are certainly cities that have ordinances that have a certain number or a certain amount of visibility, like transmissivity fencing. But we had a brief discussion internally as you're coming up that road in particular with Linda's lot. The type of fence she has will almost be opaque as you're, parallel with it. And as you get up to perpendicular, you'll be able to see through it. We can certainly look at it. There are a number of model ordinances we can lean on. So
Okay.
at the direction. of
We'll look
council,
at it then.
Yeah, I have looked at it and I've had a conversation with Scott. The unfortunate thing about this is that was not a corner until the development took place. So when you go up there, the fence is the least of the visual issues because the yard had a nice, very nice tree and spruce tree. And So I've asked Scott, when we do this in the future, when we're creating a triangle, a vision triangle, that we take that into consideration as we're looking at the development. Because I don't think anybody thought about this, and it's very unique because the sidewalk is probably a foot or so above the land, so it's kind of a hazard of people filing off the sidewalk, but anyway. Don't mean to.
Sorry to get us onto a tangent.
No problem, we do that occasionally. All right, any further questions?
I have a question. I'm just,
Councilmember Ekstrom?
there are a couple of specific instances. One is Lundstrom's, and then the other is, I can't remember the resident's name, who backs up to, behind Cafe Rio, right? He wants to plant some tall trees back behind his fence. Is this going to cause him a problem too? I'm trying to, he's on a corner also. He's not really in a sight triangle, but I just want to make sure that this is worded in a way that we're taking into account these particular lots that may not fit exactly the mold that it's going to fit on every other corner and things too.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilmember Ekstrom. That's actually the lot that spurred this request from the city manager to have me look at fences and hedges. So this would fix that issue. They already have a fence that is taller than your normal would be. It's about 7 feet tall due to the fact that it's on a state-owned right-of-way. And so they already have a taller than normal fence. With this ordinance change, they'd be able to plant those trees on the inside of their rear property line behind the fence and let those grow up as tall as they can in order to provide privacy for that property.
Fabulous. Okay, very good. We're trying to make life nicer for our residents as opposed to more difficult. So that's what I hope we were doing.
Any other comments, council? If there are none, I would look for a motion to approve the clarifying language regarding hedges as they're defined as a fence. This would be ordinance number 2021-27. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 2021-27 to amend and clarify the language regarding hedges as they are defined as a fence.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? Being none, I'll do a roll call vote to approve this motion. Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yes.
Councilmember Severin?
Yes.
Councilmember Barker?
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Did just want to ask for clarification, Councilmember Barker, was that direction from the council to look into site triangle and fencing?
I think the mayor's already started that discussion.
Okay.
So I'm okay with where it's going.
We'll now move on to another discussion. Representative will be Scott Hess, our planning director. And this is regarding earlier discussion he had regarding rezoning property, approximately 2679 north, 450 east, from residential city center to residential multifamily R4. Scott?
Okay, thank you. So a little bit of background on this one. When I first started back in May, I was contacted by Ms. Flinders with a proposal to put 6 units on an R4 zoning area across the street from the state park on family-owned property. We went through the calculation, and the R4 zone on a half an acre, given the configuration that she has, the maximum number of units that you could get on it would be 5. That's just a clarification because the packet has 6 in there. And they're not asking for changes to the R4 zone. I just wanted to make it clear that the net, total that you could get would be 5 units on that piece of property. I also, in this meeting, as Shauna was talking, I looked back through the minutes in January, and it was actually the General Plan Advisory Committee that she had met with. And the General Plan Advisory Committee recognized that they are not a legislative body. They recommended that it go through the rezoning process, but did make a comment in there that this is generally in conformity with what they were looking for in this area of the city. So whatever discussions were happening in January at that time, she did get a word from General Plan Advisory Committee, Citizen Committee, that it's generally in conformance. for staff's, staff reviewed this. John, if you can go to page 3 of the staff report, I just wanted to point out that the area residential city center itself, the zone, talks about a mix of uses. And it's really, again, it's kind of loosely defined. It isn't like, this is the total number of dwelling units that you're going to expect here. I believe it was 2017 or 2018, 2-family dwellings were pulled out of that. So right now RCC is essentially a single family zone. But I want to point out that in the current 2015 adopted general plan, the property, the pointer, property is right here. So right here on the corner of 2700 and 450. And the current general plan has this block as downtown mixed use, adjacent across the street, and the 2 blocks to the south. And then to the north, where this, I would argue that the fabric of this neighborhood is more single family. They have townhomes contemplated for the future. So townhomes being the transition on the north to the single family, which for staff, in looking for clarification of what that means and what our staff recommendation is, seems like downtown mixed use would be an appropriate place for townhomes if there's a zone to the north that is even closer in proximity to the majority of single family homes in the city, contemplates townhomes. So from a staff perspective, that was kind of one marker for why R4 or this rezoning, or you do this a bunch of different ways. You could solve it by allowing additional density in the RCC zone in those areas that make sense. But staff supports the application. And then the other piece is sorry, I lost my train of thought now. Was the previous 10-plex. So I relied, not knowing the past history on the 10-plex, of looking at this as this whole area of the city is either in transition or had transitioned from when it was originally single family to now. I'm really thankful for the public comments. I had a long conversation with Leanne and her husband about that and kind of the past woes that were happened with this 10-plex property right here and how it was approved. Notwithstanding those sins of the past, I think that a proper project in this area with its proximity to the residential services that we have, the school, the parks, municipal center, the only corner of transit that we will really ever have in this town looking forward at Washington and 2600. It seems to make sense from a staff perspective at that 10,000-foot level looking down that this is an area where increased housing choice and maybe some housing intensity seems to make sense from a walkability standpoint. And so staff can support and make the determination that this does in fact meet our general plan and meet the future for what it is. We had a lengthy discussion at Planning Commission, lots of public comments. Hopefully you had an opportunity to read through the minutes. Very well stated comments from the residents surrounding there, I thought, and made a good argument for their piece. And the Planning Commission ultimately recommended unanimously denial of the rezone application. So bring this forward to the City Council tonight for your consideration for what the best plan of action moving forward for the city is in this area, looking out 20, 30, 40 years, and whether now is the time for that transition or if we're not there yet.
Thank you, Scott. I hope the council had a chance to read Scott's write-up. It was very thorough, very informative. Council, do you have any questions for Scott while he's here at the podium? Welcome, Councilmember Stoker. Any questions? Councilmember Swanson.
Scott, do you won't know the answer to this question, but it's the result is certainly.
You talking to your mic?
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
How did Mrs. Flinders get directed to the advisory committee?
Yeah, I'm not
for this kind of a decision, because it certainly she ended up doing some things based on what someone at the advisory committee said, completely out of any kind of authority to say so.
Right. I had a conversation with Rob Scott, the previous planning director, about this, and I think Shauna and Rob had begun speaking about a year ago. So it's possible that a meeting was coming up and he advised her to come and get kind of like a thumb in the wind feel for what the General Plan Advisory Committee was doing. The comments there in January talk a lot about I won't say it's a moratorium, but the council's direction that we want to limit rezones until that general plan is figured out. So I think there was some discussion there. There could have been some discussion there that recommended her chat with that committee.
We have the co-chair from that advisory. Were you at that meeting? Steph?
We've had a few.
Staff, would you come up to the podium, please?
Yeah. Yeah. When he mentioned that, I was I do not remember that at all. I know that we've had a few public comments where someone has said, hey, we're looking to build and we were told to come here. What are you guys looking at that area? And we're like, well, we're discussing, this, but there's never been anything past that. We've never said, yes, do this. I've never seen any kind of plans, I think it was more a discussion of like, hey, we're looking to build. We were told you guys are looking at the zoning. And yeah, we're looking at doing a city center here, but we don't even, in January, certainly had no idea what we were settling on. We knew what we were discussing, and I know that we'd be happy to share that with someone who was asking at the time what we were doing, but we we've never told anyone yes.
Steph, while you're there in council, I believe that they were going to bring a recommendation on zoning and that to the general plan. I don't believe that's been finalized yet or approved by the council.
No.
Is that correct?
Correct. And we're really close. We're a lot of volunteers learning and trying to figure out how to do it and wanting to do it right, and a lot of different ideas, so. But yeah, I know that we were in good discussions in January and finally starting to feel the movement, but we would have never given anyone an okay or said, yes, this is, so.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Barker?
I was actually at that meeting. I do remember this, and I don't want to say I was frustrated listening, but we did have some members that were voicing support for what you were proposing. At the end of the discussion, I did mention that it was not the right committee and it needed to come to planning commission before you started to get approval. Because I'm part of that committee and we are just that committee is an advisory committee to the planning commission, but so I don't know if that's where I apologize if that's where you got your approval.
We do have the applicant here with us this evening. If they'd like to make additional comments at this time, be appropriate.
I don't really know that there's much more to be said. Obviously, like I said, I think that we took a lot of steps ahead of time to try to look into this before we put money and time into it. And a lot of people, I don't know if you can see on the, I will say, I don't know if you can see on the zoning on a different map, that zone is literally almost a square and veers out to take in the two blocks that we're talking about. Our block and then one next to it. I still feel like this is what needs to go across the street from the school. I understand that Leanne and the Lipperts are very upset about something that happened 16 or 17 years ago. But I don't think anyone's victimized by that 10-plex. I'm sure that there are very nice people living in that 10-plex, and I don't think that people that rent or, are living in there are necessarily pedophiles and looking down on little children in a different way than anyone else. These are nice townhomes. We made them to be that way. I know when the Chambers had a full, probably about a half acre, the same as mine years ago, decided to split that in half, and they put a an updated home on the other part of that property. No one ever, tried to tell them what they should do. They did something that was updated and was current with the times. And the property that we're trying to update is current with the times. I think it's arrogant of the neighbors and a little entitled of them to think that, they should force us to put a single family home on this half acre with a huge amount of green space. It's not the right thing to do right now, especially with all of the water and all the problems with that. This is what people want right now. So I get that they kind of want to keep it 1970. That's when we moved in. That was great for that time. But these properties up here are not historic in the way like 25th Street. They're just old and becoming very dilapidated up on those two blocks. And this would be the right thing to put there. And so if North Ogden wants to do the right thing, I think it's more than just, this property. I think it says something about North Ogden and whether they're inclusive or exclusive and, what's going to go forward. So, thank you.
I'll clarify for me, I attended the planning commission meeting. I didn't get the impression anyone was talking about forcing a single family unit there. My understanding is under the current zone, they could have 2 homes and 2 auxiliary dwelling units.
Yep. Yeah, under the current zoning, it's not large enough to split into 3 single-family homes based on the square footage, but you could get 2. And any single-family home is entitled now by state code and our own code to have an accessory dwelling unit. So that could be a basement apartment, garage apartment, completely standalone structure. So if you were to maximize the use of that land and through subdivision, you could get effectively 4 living units on the same piece of property today under the RCC zone.
Did I misunderstand? I was at that meeting and I didn't hear anyone trying to force it to be one big home with.
No, we had a lot of discussion about what it could be and splitting it and whether that would make sense. I don't remember now if it was at that meeting or after, but some discussion about duplexes maybe being reinstated in RCC. But at any rate, you get the letter of the law the day you apply. So.
Council, do you have any questions for Scott?
Yeah, I have a question.
Councilmember Severin?
So Scott, I'm still kind of confused. Are we doing 4 properties, 5 or 6?
So it's the rezone to R4. If they were to maximize it based on the calculation, we could get 5 townhomes.
And I assume it's going to be an HOA?
We haven't gotten anywhere near there. Yep, no. Rezone would be first. That wouldn't entitle the project. The project would then say it were rezoned, it would come back for a site design review. And if they want to condominium plat them and have individual sale of each of those 5 units, then that would be a subdivision plat. The Land Use Authority's Planning Commission. The council wouldn't see it short of maybe a development agreement, but under R4 on that half acre to get the setbacks as required, you could potentially do 5 units.
Thank you.
Councilman Barker?
Since you mentioned it, what's the difference between a duplex and an ADU attached to a residence?
So an ADU has to be owner occupied in order to rent it.
So one side has to be owner occupied that owns the other half.
And the other side could be rented as a long-term rental or kept as a mother-in-law apartment, or we have a 100 different configurations for those. Versus a duplex is essentially 2 single-family homes with a shared wall construction that are either owned in tandem and one owner owns one and rents the other, or they're sold entirely separate like a condominium plat would be.
So that is an option, Councilmember Barker, if the council wanted to amend the current zone to allow duplexes, that's an option.
Or, yeah.
And just for quick clarity, just so in case anybody's thinking it, because you were talking about that, you can't get an ADU in a duplex, because otherwise that would make it 2 duplexes would be 4, and then you'd add 4 more units. So yeah, that'd be like a quick way to get to 8, but
They could have 4 dwelling units.
Four doors. If duplex were if duplexes were allowed under RCC with the current size configuration of how you could split this half-acre lot, you could potentially get 4. The planning commission and council will have to act on that change before.
As I mentioned, I attended the planning commission meeting where this item was discussed. Initially, the discussion was this had already transitioned because it was a 10-plex there. But as we found out additional information, that 10-plex was probably unlawfully placed there many, many years ago. So the planning commission said, you know, they didn't think it was appropriate to count that as the neighborhood transitioning, if I remember right, Scott.
That's accurate.
So just wanted to point that out, that was kind of the initial discussion to justify the rezone. But as the planning commission received additional information, I think they disregarded that as already starting to transition.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Ekstrom, do you have a question?
No, I'm just thinking about it. Just kind of to give insight into what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking in this zone, it's allowed to have a single family unit, you know, it can be divided into 2, then with a basement apartment. I had never thought about basement apartments as being like super desirable but I've belonged to a few community chat boards, I guess you would say. And I've seen people say that they want that. They would rather have, you know, kind of live in the house and have that kind of type of dwelling. And to me, there are not a lot of those available. And it's just another option. We're trying to give as many options to residents for, you know, types of housing as we can. And that seems to be like a little nicer transition from the single family dwellings that are there now to, you know, a little higher density. You know, it's 4, but instead of, and then I'm not opposed to allowing duplexes also. I think that might be okay also. Just, again, it's not, as Steph pointed out, a big wall of townhomes that feels very different than those single family dwellings. It's a little bit of a transition while still allowing more density, because I really would like to see a more affordable type of house there close to the park, because you do want young children to be able to walk to school and things like that. And with current housing prices with being so high, it would be nice to have something that's a little bit more affordable. So those are just the thoughts that are mulling around in my head.
Thank you. I believe that's what the state has identified as their solution to affordable housing. It's accessory dwelling units.
Yep, one of the menu items, and we see ADU permits come in sporadically. We don't have a lot of them in the city, and we're probably running at 10% or fewer of our new builds. They come in with an ADU, and most of them, I would say, it's more like an upgraded basement kitchen or something along those lines, less of a standalone rental and more of like a place for mother-in-law or returning young married children. Just, you know, we'll point out an inherent difference between, say, duplexes and a new family or a new home construction with an ADU is the new home construction with an ADU, the buyer is bearing the cost of essentially 2 homes. And they're betting the cost of that they can rent the ADU for enough to cover the increased mortgage. So in this particular area of the city, with construction costs as they are on a 1/4 acre, you're going to be $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 for a 1/4 acre plus a structure plus a full ADU. You know, you have to wonder if there's going to be, I don't know if there's a market for that in this particular location of the city. We also can't legislate and require that they build the ADU, so it's possible you end up with 2 single family homes or 1. Same with the duplexes, you know, simply permitting them wouldn't make it happen. But the duplexes, you know, you have a greater chance that a developer builder, like their nephew, would construct those and then sell them, put them out on the market to sell at a more reasonable price than a large single family home with the full ADU.
Thank you. Councilman Swanson.
So thinking out loud here, what I'm hearing is that there is some comfortability with 2 homes if they had 2 ADUs, so we would have 4 living units, right? There's some comfortability with having duplexes, which would give us 4 units on that property. And in the 7+ years I've been on council, I think this is the first time that I have had a staff report from planning that differed in its recommendation from planning commission. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that. It's the first time it's happened. It's an interesting dilemma.
It was a dilemma for me as well.
The answer is 42. So what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, why are we okay with 4 units in 2 different ways, but we're not okay with 5 units in one other way? That's what I'm trying to wrap my, and understand that, the first time this came up, my gut reaction was, oh, heck no. But as we've gone through this several times, and as we look at these things and what I'm hearing tonight, we have at least 2 situations where we're okay with 4 living units on that piece of property. But we wouldn't be okay with 5 in the form of purchased townhomes. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around that. I'm not at a point just yet ready to make a decision, but I just wanted to voice that that's kind of where my brain is spinning. And you can smell it, right? Smoke. Yeah, Trevor. No comment. But that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around right now.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And I appreciate your, as a staff, being willing to say, hey, this is what we think is okay, even though it is 180 degrees different from a unified planning commission. Just makes our job harder.
I appreciate you saying that, not just telling me to get out.
As I was thinking about this, Councilman Swanson, depending on what happens tonight, this basically makes a decision for the general plan committee, because they haven't finalized their plan yet, right? I think the discussion has been what's allowed currently there.
Yeah.
Which is the 2 residential units, and if they would like accessory dwelling, that's what the current zone allows.
Right.
I'm not sure anybody's recommending that, or that the applicant would be interested in doing that, frankly. But that's the current zoning. Any other comments? Councilman Barker.
This was before my time on the council, but I found it interesting. When duplexes were removed from the RCC zone, it was because of this duplex right up the street here on 2600. That was the one that made it get removed, and that's actually a nice place to live, or a nice duplex to live in. If I'm looking at that type of a duplex, I would think that should be something that we should be promoting in our city as a affordable unit to live in. A duplex is a lot cheaper to build than 2 single-family homes. I'd be willing to look at allowing duplexes back in the RCC zone.
Once again, I don't know if that is something the applicant has.
Not tonight, but since we're discussing it.
Yes. We are trying to do the best we can to have affordability in our city, whatever the definition of that is. When townhomes are 400,000 plus, so that's never hit my definition of affordable, but I guess it is now. Any other questions before I seek a motion? Before us, council, we have a request to rezone property from 2679 North, 450 East, from residential city center to multifamily R4. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve that?
What's the ordinance number?
2021-28.
Hey, Mayor.
Councilman Barker.
I'm actually going to make a motion that we table this until the General Plan Advisory Committee presents their recommendation.
My question would be, how soon? We're all staring at Steph.
And Rob, or not Rob, sorry, Scott, sorry.
Yeah, so, and Steph could help field this question as well. I mean, I've been here 3 months. We've had 3 meetings with that group. We presented some kind of 4 different ideas, this area meeting that city center kind of opportunity area for increased density, right in the heart of that. So we could speed up our efforts there. I think that we're planning on having a planning commission and general plan advisory committee joint work session in this next month in September. I think that'll shed a lot of light on it. But it's a daunting task to zone to even the level that's shown on RCC and the townhomes and that for the entire city. The next page down on John or that for the entire city. So coming into it new, I'd like to have some time to make sure that that's done in a thoughtful way and work with the general plan advisory committee, but we will work at the pace that the city needs us to.
So is what you're saying then that you want to put this kind of on a hold?
I really didn't rely too much on the new zoning designation. I tried to write my staff report based on what I felt like this 2015 document said. And this 2015 document to me says that that's an area of transition.
We do have a motion on the floor to table. Discussion will come if we get a second. Do we have a second to table this item?
Second.
A second by Councilmember Stoker.
Mayor, I'm going to offer substitute motion.
Okay, Councilman Swanson.
I'm going to move that we approve ordinance 2021-28, allowing the rezone to multifamily R4. My basis for doing that is that we seem very comfortable with 4 units. I don't see a problem with 5, and I trust our staff report that sees this as an area in transition and that this is a use that fits within our general plan.
Okay, we have a substitute motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay, we have a substitute motion and a second. Any further discussion? John?
So just as a reminder, the next vote will be on whether the substitute motion trumps the original motion. And then you'll vote again on the motion which survives.
Of the two.
Of the two.
May I comment?
Yes, that we're open for discussion.
My feeling is, as you look on GeoGizmo, I mean, from memory, I've never done this, but when you get on GeoGizmo, there are so many apartment buildings down in that area, which seems to justify a multi-unit townhome. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
What apartments are you referring to? Complex?
You know, you've got the apartment complexes across from North Ogden Elementary. You've got the apartment complexes that are behind 7-Eleven. I mean, that just seems pretty consistent for multi-housing.
Are you referring to the 10-plex that's up there?
Well, I'm trying to figure out the 10-plex, but I don't know exactly where the 10-plex is.
All right, any other?
But I'm just saying that there's consistency within probably a half a block of this subject property of multiple units.
Okay.
And
anything else?
well, I was just gonna say, if Scott Hess makes recommendation of that, I know we've got a general planning committee, but I would have thought you would have been aware of jumping ahead and felt comfortable making that recommendation anyway.
I'm gonna take the opportunity to express my position on this since I've been encouraged to do so. I think first of all, we did have a planning commission 0 to 6 to deny the rezone. I think we're stepping out on something we told the advisory committee that we would wait to do, is to get their final recommendation. I'm not saying I'm against this. I'm just saying we're creating a little bit of a problem here when we say we're taking staff over the planning commission. I mean, we have done that before where they recommended something and we denied. So we are the final authority on the rezone. I would just point those two things out. I think the discussion was not that this ultimately may end up as a little bit higher density, but is the timing right as we go forward. But as John said, we have a motion. So at this point in time, I guess we're looking to see which motion trumps which motion. So I'll go with the fact that there's a motion on the table to approve this. I'm not in very good shape, so. So at this point in time, we have a motion and a second to approve. Or do I need to go back to the table motion first?
So
Okay, so we have a motion to table.
the second motion is to substitute the first motion. So we vote on whether the second motion trumps the first motion. So council, this vote will be which motion will go to the council for the full vote.
Whether or not we're accepting my substitute motion.
Correct.
Okay.
So not that the substitute motion is being approved,
Right.
but that it takes the place of the first motion, and then, so there's two votes coming.
Okay, the first vote we're gonna see is if this one trumps the table motion.
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Barker.
Can I just mention the reason I made the motion to table this is we've turned two developers down already and told them to wait. And so I feel like if we or approve this motion, we're gonna have those developers back asking for the same thing.
Good point. All right, I'm gonna take a vote right now.
Before more discussion?
Before any more discussion, I'm gonna take a vote on this. Does, all those in favor of Councilmember Swanson's motion trumping the table motion, I'm gonna take this.
Let's do a roll call.
Yes, I'm gonna do a roll call here. Councilmember Stoker,
No.
Councilmember Barker,
No.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
No.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Looks like your motion was denied, Councilmember Swanson.
It was.
So now we're back to tabling the motion. We have that motion made and a second. So we'll go at this point in time with tabling it. I'm gonna do a roll call vote here also. Councilmember Severing,
To table it.
to table it.
Well, since we're in the minority, I guess I'm going to say that we probably better table it.
Well, you have the right to vote however you like. But we'll take that as in favor of tabling. Councilmember Swanson.
I'm gonna qualify my vote by saying that when we told the committee that we would put a hold on rezones, it was never discussed or anticipated that it would be a year and a half plus before the committee got anything to us, and we still have nothing from the committee. It's been a year and a half. And so that's why I've been in recent months pushing forward with rezones, because effectively the committee's gotten nothing to us. It hasn't gone to the planning commission yet for a recommendation. It hasn't come to us. It's being used as in my opinion, in my words, a de facto moratorium on building, which was not the intent of our hold. So I'll say yes to the table, but we've got to get something moving forward.
Okay, Scott, you get that? Okay, that's your challenge.
Very clear, huh?
No one's ever accused Councilmember Swanson of not being clear. No?
Not yet.
Okay, Councilmember Ekstrom, are you in favor of tabling this motion?
Yes.
Councilman Barker?
Yes.
And Councilwoman Stoker?
Yes.
All right, motion is tabled for further discussion at a later date. So we'll now move on to item number 10, which is discussion or action on the resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule. With us this evening is our presenter, Jamie Jones, who's our finance director. I hope that's not because of your presentation, but because their interest in the meeting tonight.
You want to call?
Been completed, so
The rest of it's boring yesterday.
go ahead, Jamie, thank you.
So we're here to talk about the fee schedule again. On July 27th, staff had a discussion with council about the escalating cost of pumping water and encouraging conservation efforts. The fee schedule at that time was updated for the residential tiered rates. However, the non-resident and the non-residential rates were not formally addressed. So we're here tonight just to get some clarification that it fits council's council's decision if the non-resident rate to be increased is the same as the resident rate at 19 cents for the first 2 tiers, 2 and 2.5 times for the 3rd and 4th, and then the non-residential tiered rate to be increased at 19 cents for all the tiers.
Okay, it's probably just an oversight. I believe we had a discussion briefly about increasing the rates for all users. Council, do you have any questions for Jamie? Okay, so you've heard her recommendation. We'd be talking about resolution number 12-2021, which would be to amend the fee schedule as outlined here on the screen. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, Mayor, I will, I move that we accept resolution 12-2021, amending the consolidated fee schedule.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Severing. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote to approve resolution number 12-2021. Councilmember Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
and Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Resolution number 12-2021 passes unanimously. I will now move on to item number 11, which is a discussion or action to consider an ordinance adopting the final budget and tax rate for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. Jamie, if you would come forward and present this. This is ordinance number 2021-29.
It'll be 28 since we tabled the last
28,
one.
thank you.
Great. All right, I'd like to thank the mayor and council and all the public comments that have come in and department heads that have participated in getting this budget to this point. Certainly not an easy process, but we're here tonight to hopefully pass the final budget and to finalize the certified tax rate. On June 22nd, the city held a public hearing and passed the fiscal year 2022 tentative budget. The city also held a truth and taxation hearing on August 3rd. The budget presented tonight reflects the city maintaining the property tax rate of 0.001180. There are a few changes to this budget since the tentative has been passed. The general fund revenue increased in the amount of $50,500 for grants for the public safety department. The city has also applied for the American Rescue Plan Act funds, excuse me, which is also known as ARPA funds, in the amount of $2.4 million. This amount is received into the general fund, but is transferred to the capital projects fund. We will plan to have more discussion on how those the plans for those funds. The general fund expenditures for the public safety department increased at $163,000 for salaries and benefits as part of the truth and taxation discussions. The budget was also updated accordingly to reflect quite a few staff changes that we've had here recently. So, police motor pool fund expenditures have been increased to $120,000 to reflect vehicles that were scheduled to be purchased in fiscal year 21, but we could not get them until fiscal year 22. So, since those funds have already been transferred over, we are just planning to use fund balance for this expenditure. All other funds have relatively stayed the same, except for the capital projects, which are to reflect the updated funds that are moving over from the general fund. And that's all I have.
Jamie, do we have a number on what the excess revenues over expenditures were that will be transferred into the capital projects funds from last year?
From last year,
Which will,
the unaudited figure.
well, they say nothing's final until it's final.
Nothing's
That still
final.
might not be final, so we understand that.
Well, I know that it's budgeted to be 2.6 million, and I'm not 100% confident that we'll reach that, but I have a feeling it'll be about 2.4.
Thanks for your conservatism there. I'm going with 2.6, but I appreciate your conservatism. Any questions, council, for Jamie? I would point out, just to make the council aware, we've had discussion about this in regards to the tax increase being used for public safety. We are proposing, council, so that you're aware, to increase police wages $3 per hour to be competitive in the market. I sent an article to the chief and John last night. The increase by Salt Lake City has kind of created a rolling effect. It's almost a competition, who can pay the most for police officers. But in discussion with the council members, we feel that this is fair to helping retain and attract quality police officers in our city. So when you see that third bullet point, the increase in the public safety department, that also includes the hiring of a new officer, I think scheduled for January. Chief, is that correct? I think in the budget, is that right? It's projected to hire a new officer about mid-year.
Answer that. So the 163,000 does not include that at this time, does not include that additional officer. That's also why the supplies or the equipment was also reduced to 10,500.
Can I ask a question why that wouldn't be included in the budget when we've agreed to do that? Because I think we presented to the public in the Truth and Taxation that the increase would be about 196,000. I believe that the council has approved the hiring of a new officer. So I guess my question would be, why would that be included in the budget at this point in time?
Trying to help me with that, John.
Sorry, Candy.
That's
I put you on the spot. I know John would come in and give us the answer.
So it goes back to budget discussions about whether there was a bigger focus on the individual rates or the new officer. And we had scaled it down to a 6-month position, and then the decision was made before the preliminary budget to go all the way back to not adding an officer and the focus on the salaries. Some of the equipment was left in the preliminary budget still, which is why these numbers have moved a little bit. But I think we also could keep a close eye on income as we look at our revenue numbers and see if we have that opportunity to add it back in.
I believe that the proposed holding the rate, as stated by Jamie, gives us adequate revenues to hire the new officer. I thought that's what we'd agreed upon. Did I misunderstand, council, that we approved the hiring of another officer? I would propose that we further amend that budget to include the officer. I'm in favor of getting that done at this point in time.
And I apologize.
Oh, no apology
If
necessary.
that was my misunderstanding.
It's hard to follow us, Jim. We'll take the responsibility for this.
To include the new
Okay with
officer
that,
at 6
Chief?
months, excuse me.
Yeah, I think we scheduled that to hire an officer about mid-year, which would be January. Did I misunderstand on that?
That's what was in the budget we were looking at in June, as we reached the final points of discussion.
And I think that was inclusive in our Truth and Taxation hearing, right?
There is enough money in the general fund to make that, yes. With part of the revenues from that. Yes, sorry. I'm just gonna use pronouns and nondescript words, if that's okay with council.
I think I heard a yes.
Yep, that's
John.
correct.
So, John, can we go ahead and make that amendment to the budget this evening, or I don't want to defer this because I know we have to get our final budget into the state here.
So we can, if Jamie's comfortable adding that into the numbers, we can do that. It'll just be a change from the amount of money we were gonna be moving into capital projects as a programmed expense. We won't go below the number that the target was from the reduced expenditures, which was that 500,000. But that's where the money would most likely come from. But that would just be part of the approved budget for now, unless Jamie's more comfortable coming back with an amendment before we made the actual hire sometime between now.
I surely want to comply with the state requirement to get a budget into them. So if we need to amend it later, that's fine. I've just found that sometimes we get forgetful that we approve that, and then the chief has to give us the freezing again, so I just soon do it if that's what we've agreed on, but I don't want to cause problems complying with the state.
I'm comfortable coming back with amendment. That's,
I just add something. It was mentioned that the equipment, I believe was left in the, one of the line items that was intended for this new officer, but this is a surprise to me. And I'm happy about it, but the vehicle for this officer was also removed. We were given our 4 replacement vehicles that we had asked for. Those have been designated to replace current vehicles, so we could take one of those out of the rotation and designate it for this new officer. Otherwise, we would also need to add another vehicle to the budget.
And I think that's a good reason to bring back an amendment, and we'll bring it back quickly. It won't be January, just to make sure we do everything, or that we've got it completely.
Yeah, if Susan would just bold this in the minutes, that there is another officer authorized by the council. So,
Feeling the chief's not gonna let us forget.
well, you never know. Is that okay, council, that we come back with an amendment later? I just want to point out to the public that if this budget is approved, this does include the increase in property taxes as discussed in the Truth and Taxation hearing. And I do want to point out that we have budgeted excess revenues over expenses to a degree that we feel would cover the majority of payment for a bond on the public safety building. But this budget does include the consideration of being able to do that without hopefully any tax increase, but definitely not a substantial tax increase. Any questions? Jamie, thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I had an earlier discussion with John. I just misunderstood. I thought that included the reason it had gone down from the Truth and Taxation is that we were talking about half year officer, not 0 officer. So my misunderstanding. So council, I'd be looking for a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-28, which is a motion to approve adopting the final budget and the tax rate for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance 2021-28, adopting the final budget and the tax rate of 0.001180 held from last year.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Swanson. Do we have a second to Councilmember Swanson's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson?
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker?
yes.
Councilmember Severing?
Yes.
And Councilmember Barker?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item 12. I'd be seeking an action to recess the city council meeting and convene the redevelopment agency board. Do we have a motion to recess the meeting and enter into the RDA meeting?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Stoker. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of recessing the city council meeting and convening the redevelopment agency board, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, we're now in discussion regarding the redevelopment agency budget. Once again, our presenter will be Jamie Jones, our finance director.
so we are looking to amend the CDA budget tonight. When there is a fund balance deficit in any fund, the state code requires that a budgeted line item be clearly identified at a 5% of total revenues of those funds that are set aside to reduce that deficit. This amendment is to meet that requirement. And since the total revenues for the CDA fund is $100,000 this year, 5,000 is budgeted to reduce that deficit. The unaudited, just so you know, the unaudited fund balance right now is 395 at June 30, so in deficit. We will also possibly amend the budget once again, once that final fund balance is determined after the audit, so to stay in compliance. So that's what we're doing tonight.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Any questions for Jamie? I don't see any, so I would be looking for a motion.
We have the public hearing on this one.
You are correct. So at this point in time, we'll enter into a public hearing. If anyone here or online has any comments regarding the RDA budget, now would be the time to come forward. Seeing none, then I would look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
So moved by Board Member Swanson. Do we have a second? Second by Board Member Severing. Any discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now I would look for a motion to approve ordinance RDA number 2021-30.
29 now, and we're on. We tabled the one.
I'm sorry.
This is RDA though.
Yeah, the last one we just did was 20.
It's a numbering system to help the recorders so that every ordinance doesn't matter who it was passed by, it follows the same order.
I did correct that up to 29, but I thought then this is RDA and the others were not RDA
You're
ordinances.
fine. It got confused with the tabling.
No problem. I just get confused even if it's not confusing, so that's okay. So do we have a motion then to approve RDA ordinance number 2021-30?
Mayor, I move that
29.
29.
I move that we accept the RDA ordinance number 2021-29.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Stoker. Any further discussion? We'll take a roll call vote on this. Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes unanimously. Okay on that, Susan?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on then to item number 14, which is a discussion or action to adjourn the RDA meeting and reconvene the city council meeting. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Stoker. Do you have a second?
Second.
And a second to adjourn the RDA meeting, reconvene the city council meeting. Any discussion? Being none, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. We'll now go on to item number 15 on our agenda, which is a Councilmember Swanson will discuss, give us a report on the city's finances as required by state law that we review those on a regular basis. Councilmember Swanson, you want to proceed?
Sure. Council, as of July 31st, we've had 8% of the year elapse. And our general fund revenues are at 11.9% of budget. So we're ahead on the revenue collection. Charges for services are at 16%. That includes the recreation revenues received in the summertime. Aquatic Center's been doing pretty good this summer. Intergovernmental, man, that's a long one. Intergovernmental revenues at 36.4% through 8% of the year, but that's because of the ARPA money, the American Recovery. What's the P stand for?
Now that you say it.
I can't remember what the P stands for. Well, ARPA.
Sounds like a whale.
It probably is, yeah. of 1.2 million of the 2.4 that we're expecting. Building permits are at 12.7%. So building continues to be strong. 8% of the way through the year, and our building permits are at 12.7%. Expenditures are a little over the 8%. We're at 9.5%, but that is as a reminder that we have the interdepartmental, mostly the liability insurance that is paid in lump at the beginning of the year. So that throws what looks like our expenses off. That will balance itself out as we go through the year. We don't have that monthly payment that's going out for the insurances. Finance is still working on adjusting all of the entries for the audit, the payroll expenses and all that, because we're hot into audit time. Again. Didn't we just finish that there?
Yeah, just barely.
John, can you pull up the slide that shows our sales tax trends? We only have them through May. We should be getting the June numbers here soon, but we don't have them for tonight. But a couple of things of note that struck me on here. Again, we see that there is this downward trend in sales tax collection. And if you look at the fiscal year 2020, which is that purplish light blue there in the middle, you'll see that while there was a drop from March to April that we see pretty regularly, usually there's been an increase between April and May, and we saw a continued decline. It'll be interesting to see where we are for June, if the historic trend of continued rise returns, or if we stay on a downward trend. And that'll be interesting to watch and further inform some of the decisions we make regarding what's going to happen with sales taxes and those kinds of things. But year over year, we are doing wonderfully well sales tax wise, and sales tax wise over budget, we're doing equally as well. So we've been blessed that way this year. Police budget is $3.1 million. Property taxes, which are completely dedicated 100% to our public safety department by ordinance now, is 1.795, or about 57.7% of our police and public safety budget is garnered through property taxes. That's really just for your information, so that we have an idea of how much we're still relying on the rather volatile and not always dependable sales tax that we get locally and from the state to fund our public safety and other programs and budgets within the city. And that is the report that I have for this evening. As we get further into the budget, and Jamie and I have our meeting tomorrow afternoon, we'll have more information to bring to you.
Thank you for that report, Councilmember Swanson. I did see the market kind of decline today based upon a decrease in retail sales, so it'll be interesting. I think we'll get our report sometime this week, generally.
Friday.
Friday, so we can record that in last year's budget, which will get us to our 2.6 million number to transfer over to the capital projects fund to help with the public safety there.
2.58. I think it'll also be interesting to see what the announced dramatic increase in food stamps benefit in October, 25% increase starting in October. While that won't directly translate over to sales tax on food and things like that, that isn't charged for food stamps, it will have an effect of freeing up expendable income in the pockets of those that will now use the food stamps for more food and put more expendable cash that they may spend on other things. Which
I think I saw a report where citizens had put away about $2.7 billion in additional savings during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You've also got the advanced child care, child credit. So it'll be interesting to see if the economy keeps going along. We hope it does. Anything else, Councilmember Swanson?
Buckle your seatbelts. It could be interesting.
Okay, well, thank you for your report. Council, any comments from citizens that we need to address this evening? That would be the time to make those comments. Council? Councilmember
I
Swanson.
did have one. Let me pull this up real quick from a gentleman. From a Mr. Mike Larson about some concrete cleanings that were left on a private lane at 2600 north and 1225 east. He sent me a photo of it, got it on email as well. He says that appeared when the slurry and all that was done on 2600. So if we can make sure that gets cleaned up, John, if you would.
Will you forward that email to me?
I certainly will.
Councilman Swanson.
That's it for me.
Councilman Severie.
Yeah, I just was curious where we were at. I'm not sure if this individual sent this to all of us or to me, but on the Utopia. Did everybody get that email? So I promised him I would respond here at City Council to find out where we were heading with Utopia. I told him what I understood from our last meeting.
Sure. John, you want to respond to that?
So we do have that on an upcoming topic that Utopia kind of went on radio silent on us. I think they had so many cities interested that they scaled back. There are a few communities in Weber County who are looking at doing their own cable infrastructure without going through Utopia. So they would actually own it, maintain it. They would contract with an outside company to do a lot of the work. But anyways, just so we've got some updates for you. The hard part is just finding a meeting to add it to.
Okay. And then the second thing I had, Mayor, I had an individual call me who lives right on 2750 and the Canal Road. His house is just immediately west of the Canal Road. And he's been very concerned. I guess there's been a couple of potential individuals, pedestrians or bicyclists hit by cars right there. And he was recommending a speed bump. And I said, you know, we don't get too excited about speed bumps, but maybe we could place some kind of a sign there to remind individuals to travel safely. 750 in the Canal Road.
Right. Are the people getting struck crossing on the canal, or are they going up and down 2750?
I got the impression there was people that were crossing from crossing 2750 on Canal Road.
Okay.
At about 1350.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was unaware that we'd had anybody hit there.
Well, I didn't say somebody was hit, but they were worried that there was, I'm just passing on what the citizens said, and looked like there was some.
There is a lot of crossing there. I don't know if it would be or in a crosswalk or something of that nature. There's a lot of biking and walking along there.
If the department head over Public Works could get with them about a crosswalk.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking to the mayor. I don't have glasses, so I couldn't see your eyes. I thought you were talking to the mayor. Well, you gotta run it by this group before I pass it on.
So, yeah, so Chief will do a study, and if it merits it, then we'll install the appropriate indicators. The crosswalk lights are more expensive, the ones that are flashing. So that would then probably have to come back as a budget amendment, but there might be an option to put the paint down within the budget that we already have established for road supplies this year.
So then you'll do the study and then let Dave know.
We'll go, we'll look at it and see what kind of study might be warranted.
Okay.
And just so y'all know, our speed trailer is down for service. We're getting a lot of requests for it, so if you have people ask why the speed trailer is not out that way. Okay, we'll look at it and see That might be one.
Is it true that Councilman Swanson broke that because it only goes double digits and he was going triple digits along the road?
So he was actually out bashing mailboxes, but the bass actually got.
Okay. Councilmember Stoker.
that one coming.
It's 9:30. We have to have some levity at some point in time during council. Councilmember Stoker.
Well, I'm just wondering, since the study was mentioned, if another study could be done to merit rechanging that stop sign on Mountain Road. Because by the time people come down from Mountain Road to my road, they're going 45 miles an hour or more. It's just now become a raceway. And even if you look around the corner, because there is a line, side of line, and the tree, there's a tree that blocks some of it. And by the time you see there's no car and you pull around that corner, there's a car. And you're like, where did they come from? So I think it needs to be restudied.
They do come off that hill pretty quick. However, I've noticed when there's an officer parked there, they don't come off the hill very quick. But when it's not, they do
Of
come
course,
off
when
pretty
an
quick.
officer's there, they never come off it quick.
Well, I need about 150 more officers.
Okay, well, hey, we gave you one
That's
to start. Anything else? Councilmember Stoker.
Just thanks to everybody. They're great.
Councilmember Barker.
Usually I have council or department report tonight, but I didn't want to do one, so I'm gonna give you a building update. It was mentioned tonight that homes are being built smaller and smaller. We have a sort of ordinance in our city that every home over 6,200 square feet gets a fire sprinkler system, and I have had 2 people come and talk to me yesterday about putting sprinklers in, and I reviewed a 3rd plan today. I'll have reviewed more plans this year than I have in the previous 7 years. Our homes are not being built smaller and smaller. We actually have a lot of people buying multiple lots to build bigger and bigger. So that's my report is people want their bigger house and the bigger lots. I think that we need to remember that when we have people asking to downsize the zones because they think they want to sell townhomes and more units. I think people do want bigger lots. As we noticed tonight, we upzoned a lot for it. So
I think that's a good point. I think as a council, our goal ought to be to provide options. I think to say that everybody wants a small home
right
is inaccurate. Everybody wants a big home, but studies show that actually those who start in a starter home, their goal is to get a bigger lot and a bigger home. So I think we just need to keep in mind that we need to have options for our citizens. So thank you, Councilmember Barker. Councilmember Ekstrom, do you have anything you'd like to add this evening?
I do not. How about that?
All right, thank you. John, if you could get me a report back on the private street there off of 1225, there where the homeowner was indicating that the road base was disturbed by the repaving of that road. I'd appreciate it. Any comments from staff tonight, John or Jamie or Susan?
I have just
Scott.
3 quick things. One is there's lots of kind of end of summer activities happening, including the city employee party, of which you are employees. So please plan for that for next Tuesday. Food will be provided. That'll be after the official canvas meeting. That'll be the only thing on the agenda for next week will be the canvas and a quick minute or 2 approval, assuming that we have those ready from anyways. You might have heard our sewer backed up at the equestrian park. Someone drove over the clean out pipe and snapped it off and it fell down into the sewer pipe, blocked it up. Unfortunately happened on a day that we had an event up there with it wasn't our local youth rodeo group, but it was a different group, and they were able to make do. But if you hear about that, that we hope to get it fixed soon, but right now those bathrooms are closed. And then the last thing is Parks, if you have friends or you yourselves are looking for a part-time job. We basically have lost all of our seasonal staff back to college and high school. And even with the watering reductions that we've seen, we are needing help. And so if you know of anyone, we are excited to find people willing to mow and weed eat. And the mayor can only do it so often because it's hard work.
He's not in shape. He tried it once, didn't work out that well.
And we have looked at other options. There's remote mowers out there, little like Roomba lawn mowers. The issue we have is we are fairly confident they would be vandalized and it would cost much more money to do that type of a thing. But Parks is looking at other ways to maybe invest in some infrastructure to make maintenance easier. So just look for that and expect that we'll be having a discussion, not necessarily a request for money, but a discussion about options moving forward.
So before I give the last word to the citizens and public comments, John, would you just address, I'm sure the council, not the only one that's received this, concern about the landscaping that took place on private property on 2600, 2700 there, just so the public, those who'd like to know, have access to knowing?
Yeah, so we had property, associated with the widening. They've landscaped some lawn and then quite a bit of xeriscaping, but there has been quite a bit of concern. We don't get involved in the timing of it. We did let them know several weeks ago that we recommend delaying landscaping. The bright side is that they were responsive to our requests from the original to do a lot of xeriscaping. In fact, everything that's in the right of way is xeriscaped, where it used to be turf. And as you move up the road on Washington Boulevard, that also there'll be a lot of xeriscaping installed on the city property for that same reason, to reduce the maintenance burden, the water burden. But it is private property. We submitted requests and just, I don't want to say we were met with a cold shoulder, but I think they felt they were too far along and they were going to risk the weather and the water issues. And we'll see if they have to replant their grass next year or if they switch it out for something else.
Prime example though, that people have property rights.
Yep.
And we're just trying to honor those. Council, I would just remind too, to continue to give some thought, the money we are getting from the federal government, the 2.4 million. We do have need for water infrastructure, but be giving that some consideration because we need to address that along with the RDA plan for funds that are in the RDA. So, yes.
I thought I saw Jeanette raise her hand.
Oh, I did. I was waiting.
Yeah, we're gonna have public comments right now. We're gonna have public comments right now. We're gonna give the citizens the last word.
The last word.
So now it's time for public comments. Just a reminder, state your name, if you're a resident, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Jeanette Sweet, resident of North Ogden, and I've actually got a couple of questions based on what I just recently heard, and a comment. I spoke to Chief Quinney about the speed bikes that come down off the top of the hill. I'm straight up on Lakeview Drive, the new development and everything, and the 10 speeds come flying down past my house, and I'm very concerned about that. So along with what he was talking about in another area, where there was a concern about physical harm to people trying to cross, I'm very concerned about these people coming down, 2, 3 of them at least a day come past my house. I'm backing out. These people are speeding down at 50, 60 miles an hour. I guarantee you it's that fast. They're using it as a training run for their cycling experiences. So I was, after my conversation with Chief Quinney and understanding that, there's only so many people that they can utilize to do that kind of work. I was gonna even take and laminate a poster board and put it up and say, cyclists 30 miles an hour, period, rules of the road, just to try and stop. And I've got a big divot that Public Works came and put a little bit of tar into, but otherwise, once they hit that thing, they're gonna go head over heels. So that's one thing. The police department vehicles, we had that taxation meeting, and it was definitely the understanding that we were getting an officer, $16,000 for a vehicle, plus the additional equipment for that officer. And so understanding what Chief Quinney said about possibly utilizing one of the former vehicles, what was supposed to be happening with those 4 vehicles in the first place? Were they being sold off? Were they being utilized somewhere else in the county? Can somebody answer that for me?
Our vehicles are on about a 6-year rotation. They're in the field, being basically lived in 40 hours a week. And at the end of that 6 years, typically, sometimes it's 7 or 8, depending on how many vehicles we actually get afforded that year. We bring in the new car, we outfit it with the equipment it needs, and the officer moves over, and then we disassemble the car they moved from. Anything that we can salvage, we keep, and then that car gets basically put on the retail market, and we sell it.
After we just sold, I think, 2, didn't we, Chief?
Yeah, we sold 2 of our Tahoes that just came out of service last year.
So is part of that money able to go back into the budget to compensate for that vehicle that we were gonna be short in the budget?
I see our finance director shaking her head.
Okay. And then my concern about the xeriscaping and the request to not do any landscaping at the top of the hill. Is that only until, say, late fall or whatever, when water's already shut off? Because I'm not anxious to get mud flowing down into my neighborhood like it had done several years ago. And so can somebody answer that for me?
I think the last discussion I had is there was going to be little landscaping done until next year because of the water situation.
So when we get the spring thaw, what happens to all of that then? That's just mud up there, right?
Well, could be, but I can't answer that question.
Okay, well, that's a
There's a
concern for me and
possibility.
the rest of the neighborhood, because when they had that big snow melt after Marriott leveled that ground up there and changed the natural terrain, people got flooded out at the top of the hill. And as my understanding was that the city had no liability for that. But if we're making this request to be able to save water and et cetera, then I certainly don't want the mud coming or that water coming back down into people's neighborhoods. There were $30,000 to $50,000 damage in numerous homes at the top of the hill. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. John, anyone electronically that has raised their hand would like to make a comment?
We do have a comment from JD Dalpas.
Okay, JD, go ahead, please.
Hey there, JD Dalpas, North Ogden resident. I just wanted to give a shout out to the North Ogden Police Department. Last week I saw a post about a stolen vehicle in the 2850-ish area of North Ogden. And it had gone a few days without seeing any response on that thread. And I was driving down 2850 at approximately 1025 east. And I peered down the road and I saw this vehicle that had been reported stolen. And so I called non-emergency, and the North Ogden Police Department was there within about 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes. It was super quick. And they had 2 units on scene and had a third there. And then CSI was on its way. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. I believe it was returned to its owner, but just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job by the police department.
Thank you, JD. Chief, pass that on to your officers if you would.
I will.
Anyone else, John or Susan?
Not at this time.
Anyone else? All right. Looking for a motion from Council Member Stoker to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.